everybody, Maran here for another My Week With video. So this week I've been driving the 2022 Hyundai Elantra N. And so the Elantra N is this fantastically fun vehicle. I already had a blast reviewing one on the launch event where I was able to take it around the track, the autocross course, and on the roads of Northern California. And so in this video though, I was able to live with one for an entire week. I've put over 160 miles on it here in My Week With it, and have a lot of updated impressions on it. So, you know, the core things still remain. You know, it still is a fantastic value. I still think it's the most fun per dollar you can get as far as at least four-door sedans goes. And it's just amazing the way that they package this, and the fact that it is as affordable as it is, you know, being about $33,000 for a manual transmission one like this. And so there's some interesting things though, like as you might have noticed in that very first acceleration, the axle tramp, I think, is what I can describe it as, where, I mean, the front end really hops aggressively, and part of that is because these roads are wet here, so that makes it a lot worse. Whenever it's dry, it doesn't do that as much, but it still does do that a tiny bit. It's just the wheel spin is so aggressive here in this thing, but I almost feel like I'm gonna break something whenever I do a full throttle acceleration in the rain here, because it's just like really intense with the way it hops around up there. And not sure if they engineered it to be that way or what the deal is, but I didn't experience that obviously on the nice dry roads of Northern California. But anyway, so that's one little thing that I noticed. A couple of little things that I noticed here about this vehicle. So I think that, you know, as far as just off the cuff, you know, kind of subjective driving impressions, I think I definitely had way more fun in this than I did, than the Civic Si, but way more fun in this than I had even the Civic Type R, than even the Golf R, or the WRX. I mean, all of those are less fun than this because of just the way that, you know, they amped up the fun. They really played it up with the exhaust crackling and popping louder than the Golf R, and the others don't even have anything like that or any kind of exhaust notes to speak of whatsoever, which is still crazy that performance cars don't have exhaust notes, but the Civic Si and the WRX, that's the case. But, you know, just that plus all the customization of, you know, the different modes, the drama, just even like when you change gears in the N modes here, the way that it like has this graphic that like animates and like feels like you're going through a new dimension with each gear change, the way it goes from 3 to 4, and the numbers, the way it's just animated. They really went the extra mile with fun little toys and touches that the others don't bother with, and I'm not sure why, because these days, you know, none of these cars are trying to be the fastest thing out there. You know, I know Civic, they're still obsessed with the Type R lap times and stuff, but you know, people buying this kind of stuff, you just want something fun for the most part, especially if you're looking at it as a daily driver, you know. And so I really love that they focus on that fun component here. So we're coming up to some corners here, the same corners I always take in all my other reviews, and let's see how it handles. The roads are damp, it just downpoured recently, but with this limited slip, electronic limited slip diff you have in the front here, it really does a good job of putting the power down really, really well. I'm in the full-blown N mode, by the way, and so that gives you the loudest exhaust settings and also the stiffest suspension, stiffest steering, and of course everything with the powertrain and stuff being all in its stiffest mode. And so it does a really good job, because there's been a few times where I've felt that it wants to understeer, and then that LSD intervenes and really, you know, carves into that corner and gives you that turn in that you're looking for, that it doesn't feel like it naturally wants to do. But it's not an artificial feeling, but it's like this extra helping hand that comes in and kind of saves the day for you with the way that LSD feels whenever you're in low traction scenarios. But I mean, also with these tires, it's really great having, you know, the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires. They're 245 wide, you know, 10 mil wider than what you get on the Veloster N. And this thing is so fantastically fun though. I mean, but the handling is fantastic. I mean, I knew it was going to be fantastic from my first, you know, review, but on my own back roads, I mean, there's no body roll, there's no lean, it just does it effortlessly, aside from the effort of the steering, because whenever you have the steering in its sportiest setting here, it is heavy. It is definitely takes a good bit of muscle to turn, but it's all part of this sporty vibe. And the great thing is all the adjustability here in this. You know, some of the competitors have maybe a little bit of adjustability, but none of them come close to even having half the adjustability that the N has here. And so I can dial in, like I have my own custom mode here, so that custom one mode I set up so that it has the softest suspension, softest steering, everything else is in the full-blown N mode, so I can have the loud exhaust, I can have the great powertrain response, which gives me quicker throttle, and all those things to make this a lot more fun. And that's really the thing. I was kind of surprised, because I honestly never drove the Elantra N in its normal mode whenever I was doing the first review. I was just always blasting around in N mode, having a blast. But, you know, I tried out the normal mode, and it's not as fun. It's actually kind of boring. They really dulled the throttle response in normal mode and really toned things down a little bit more than I personally would even want from a normal mode. And so, you know, if you go on one of these on a test drive and you're like, like this isn't quite as exciting as I was hoping it would be, make sure you are in one of those N modes, because that is definitely where all the fun is at. Everything else kind of tones it down a little bit. There's even a sport mode for some reason, but that also, I just say go for the N modes. You get the fun gauge cluster set up in the N modes and stuff anyway. But kind of just was surprised. I'm like, wow, this thing is actually pretty tame feeling. The boost seems to come on later in normal mode and everything. So keeping it in that Sport Plus mode or whatever for the engine is definitely the way you're going to want to go here to have the most fun in the Elantra N. And so other things here. So now, you know, I obviously have tons of praise for this car. It's still fantastic. It's still my pick, hands down. Cliff Notes, you know, I mean, it's the best thing out there as far as four-door cars go, in my opinion. But a few little things. So first off, you know, the shifter here in the Elantra N, it's fine. It's a little plasticky. It's not the most mechanical feeling shifter. It's not very satisfying to use. I mean, yes, it's a manual. It's great. I love this as a manual, and I will take any manual whatsoever. I'm not going to cry about manuals anymore because they're so rare these days. It's just the fact that there's one in the presence of this car makes me happy. But if I'm going to nitpick, you know, I really think that like the Civic Si even has a much better feeling shifter than this does. But everything else, shifter-wise, is great. You know, the clutch is pretty easy to learn and, you know, very predictable. There's really no rev hang either in any of the modes, so that's also very much appreciated. So they didn't mess around with any dumb rev hang to try and get one extra MPG or anything. So that's all good, but wow, that diff. I mean, it's crazy how this thing hops around. But one other thing, so, you know, I had a few minutes to drive the manual on the launch event, but I didn't have a ton of time. But, you know, having a whole week here with the manual, I'm pleasantly surprised by how punchy the manual feels. Obviously, the DCT version is going to be the faster feeling one because of its 8 ratios that are all shorter and closer in spacing. But, you know, the 6-speed, it doesn't neuter the experience as much as like the Golf R, for example, where that feels a lot less exciting with the manual just because of how widely the gears are spaced out. This, you know, clearly I think it was optimized for the dual clutch still, just from an excitement standpoint, but there's more toys in the dual clutch. You have the overboost mode you don't get here in this, a bunch of the other stuff, you know, with the way they automate the DCT to be sportier and stuff. You don't have any of that stuff, of course, here in the manual either, but it still was a really fun experience. The only other little minor nitpick about this whole manual experience is that you have this big button for the rev matching to turn it on and off, but unfortunately it doesn't remember your selection between key cycles. So every time I get in this car, I gotta hit to turn on auto rev matching. And so, because I prefer that, I mean, it does better than basically anyone can do it on their own anyway. If you want the engagement, sure, you know, you can obviously have it off and be fine, but I like having it on. But it's just like every single time I would do my first downshift in the morning when I'm driving off somewhere, I'm like, oh wait, I gotta turn rev match on again, because I would never remember each time. And so, you know, it was just something I had to go through each time and pop it on. Very minor, especially since it's just a steering wheel mounted button. Very easy to do. These are true nitpicks. I mean, like I said, this car is amazing, but I gotta find something to complain about, and that was one thing that I was like, wish it would remember that. Every other car that has auto rev matching remembers between key cycles and doesn't force you to change that every time you hop in the car. One other minor little thing about the daily driving experience that I noticed is that while the suspension does have adjustability to it, and it certainly is stiffer in the stiffest mode, even in the softest mode, though, it still isn't super soft. So they haven't mastered the adaptive dampers like I feel Honda has. Like the Civic Type R, that went from being like race car stiff to like magic carpet ride smooth between its softest and stiffest modes. And it was like amazing to behold how that thing changed. This, it's a lot less dramatic, and so, you know, as a daily driver, yes, this car is awesome enough. I would live with a stiff ride, you know, even though it wouldn't be my first choice for a comfy daily driver, but, you know, it's livable for sure. But I wish that they had a little bit more range between the modes there to truly give you a super soft ride whenever you want it, and a super stiff one. The stiffness is fine, so if you want it in stiff mode all the time, you'll have no complaints there. But if you want something softer, you know, don't think that the adaptive suspension is going to make this feel like a Cadillac whenever you're, you know, driving around. I mean, it's still going to be kind of stiff. So just keep that in mind. Also, these seats, I kind of talked about this in my Veloster N DCT review as well. These seats, they're a little on the stiff side, and they're not perforated, so this Alcantara can kind of stick to your back a little bit whenever it's warmer out. Not crazy about that setup, honestly. They're heated seats, but there's no cooling here, unfortunately, so you don't have any help as far as summertime driving, so probably won't be the most comfortable, you know, in the summertime here whenever it gets hot in this interior. Again, something I would live with because of how awesome this car is, but it's just another little minor downside here of the Elantra N. Another little daily driving nitpick is the stereo. So the stereo is very good sounding. So there's actually nothing bad to say about the stereo, aside from the fact that it's a Bose stereo. It's great that they give you the stereo upgrade here in the Elantra N, especially considering the low price tag. But the stereo, it's still, even though it's a Bose system, it's not as good as the Bose system in the Civics that have this system, like the SI or the Sport Touring hatch. But so it's not as good as that. It's also not as good as the Bose stereo in the Mazda 3. That still takes the crown in the compact segment as far as awesome sounding stereos. Again, you're buying this car probably for the performance, not for the luxury features or the stereo experience. But just another thing I want to mention, you know, you might see, oh, it's got a Bose stereo, it's going to sound amazing. It does sound good. It is a very good, I'd say above average sounding stereo, but it doesn't wow me like the Civic stereo or the Mazda 3 stereo. One other goofy little thing that I also noticed whenever I was just doing a little bit of a highway cruise was that one day I had the windows down, actually, and I had the HVAC system off, but for some reason, even though it was off, it was blasting heat. Like, not just a little bit of heat, like it was full-blown, like full fan, it felt, at least to me, like full fan heat, like super hot heat coming out of this. And the climate controls were only set for like 70 degrees. There was no reason why it was supposed to be blasting heat, even if I did have the climate control on. Strangely enough, when I turned the climate control on, then it quit blasting heat. I'm not sure, you know, if it needed to cool itself off or what the deal was, but it was just kind of bizarre. I'm like, why is it blasting the heat? Could just be a weird little glitch or quirk of this car or something. But one thing I really did like about my week here with the Elantra, and it's just how family friendly it is. So, you know, I have a daughter, and she's in a rear-facing car seat that's, you know, one of these massive rear-facing seats. And thankfully, you know, the Elantra itself is just, you know, nice and long and spacious. And so you have plenty of room for the family, you know. Having my wife sitting behind me, she had no complaints. I'm not a tall person, I'm only 5'9", but you know, she had plenty of room behind me. It was totally comfortable. We had plenty of room for the car seat and enough room for normal sized adults to also sit up front here and not be hugging the dashboard. So that's really good. I mean, the new Civic is also pretty spacious, but some of the other compact vehicles, like the Mazda 3, you know, they're a lot tighter and don't have as much space as this does. So I just was really impressed. You know, if you are considering one of these as a family driver kind of car, it's going to do that very well. It also has a massive trunk. I mean, it was crazy amount of stuff I was able to, you know, stuff in that trunk. It's kind of wild. It's just really wide, super long, and so, you know, having this roomier, more spacious new Elantra really benefits the Elantra N and helps it to be more practical. And honestly, I think it's way more practical than even the Kona N with its hatch, because, you know, that hatch is tiny in those things. You have probably almost triple the length of this trunk compared to that hatch. And so, you know, definitely very nice and very practical, I think, here with the Elantra. So that was another nice little perk here, and, you know, so I can wholeheartedly recommend this if you are someone who has kids and, you know, needs to have a good amount of space. This can play that role very, very well. And the last little thing I do also have to mention is the color of this Elantra N, which was so divisive. I don't know, there was one person who commented on the color of the Veloster N whenever I had one of those in this color for a week. But in this car, I mean, good grief, everyone was talking about this color, commenting on it. I don't know if it's because there's more of a larger coverage area with this paint color with this, because it's a bigger car versus the Veloster, or what. But I mean, man, everyone was commenting on this color, from the receptionist at the dentist's office to, you know, I mean, every single person that sees this color was commenting on it. And it's so funny, you know, some people actually don't like it, other people love it. So it's just, it was kind of funny. I personally like it. I think it's really cool. It does stand out, and it's very different than even other, you know, light blue colors out there. But it was just one funny little thing, like the most talked about thing this week with this car, from everyone, from bystanders to you know, people that I knew, you know, everyone was like talking about this color. The one funny thing, if you do get one of these in this color, be prepared for lots of conversation about it. So that's just one thing I was not expecting. And then the last thing I want to mention here are my fuel economy and my pricing here of the Elantra N. So first off, fuel economy here. So over now 169 miles of driving. My average has been 25.5 mpg. It was worth noting I did do probably about 75 or 80 miles on the highway in this one, so a lot more than I usually do. So I'd say, you know, probably almost half, maybe even a little more than half of my mileage was on the highway. So I'd say I was expecting close to that combined figure. These are rated at 20 in the city, 30 on the highway, and 23 combined. So I'm getting 25 and a half. I'm doing over that combined figure. Again, it's not an exact science, but I'm just saying that I feel like I got slightly better fuel economy than I was expecting to, and it does overperform, I think, those estimates. So if you see the fuel economy ratings, you might be like, I don't know, with gas prices being high these days, worried about getting 20 miles on the gallon. You know, typically I usually get 1 to 2 mpg less than the city rating in my usual driving. Again, the highway driving in this certainly helped a little bit, but I still did a lot of idling and a lot of ripping around, using the boost and stuff, and I'm still getting 25 and a half mpg. So, you know, one other very important thing to note here, that, you know, this motor is very fuel efficient still. I mean, and that compared to like the WRX, I think the WRX I was getting like 19 or 20 mpg in that. Obviously that has all-wheel drive, so that's a little bit of a concession there. But, you know, I mean, still, this is going to be way more fuel efficient than a WRX, even the new ones. And, you know, it's going to just be a little bit easier on your wallet than, you know, some of the competitors might be, like the Golf R or something, which doesn't do quite as good a fuel economy as this does. Or even like a GTI, you know, might struggle to match this. So I'm pretty impressed with that as well. And then the last thing that really none of the competitors can match is the value proposition here of the Elantra N. They nailed the pricing of the Elantra N, and I did a whole dedicated video praising the Elantra N pricing. You can go watch for the deep dive on the pricing if you want. But, you know, essentially it's $33,000, which makes it about, you know, $4,000 or so more expensive than the Civic Si, which has way less power, way less toys, way less customization, way less fun. For $4,000 more, you get this. You know, and like I said, there are some things that the Civic does better. The shifter, the ergonomics are better, the visibility is better. Because this, you know, because of this seat the way it is, it's kind of angled upward a little bit. I didn't have the most comfortable driving position, and the dashboard comes up a little higher than I would like, so visibility isn't, you know, as good as it is in like the Civic, which has bigger windows and more glass. So I think ergonomically the Civic is better. I think the Civic's inputs are a little bit better, with the steering feeling a little more natural, the shifter. I think Honda did all the little detail things a little bit better, and, you know, just from a livability standpoint, the Civic is better. I think the Civic was a little friendlier to me to drive. The seats aren't quite as aggressively bolstered, so these seats are almost as bad as the Type R seats, with really being aggressive, and so, you know, hopping in and out of these is a little more effort than it is, you know, in something like a Civic Si. So I think, you know, if you don't need tons of power, I still probably would be totally happy daily driving a Civic Si, even a little bit more so than this. If you don't need all the drama and excitement of this. But, I mean, you know, it's hard to argue for the Civic Si when you can get one of these for just $4,000 more, with so much power, so much more, you know, sound and fun and everything else. And so, you know, it's tough to beat. I mean, even like they just came out with pricing for the Integra from Acura, and obviously that's a luxury brand, and that has more luxuries. It's going to have, you know, way more speakers and, you know, a lot more excitement as far as the luxury stuff goes, and that's a hatch and stuff. But, you know, that's still, I mean, it's just worth noting. I mean, it wasn't a great value anyway, but 200 horsepower for like $36,000 in those. You get almost 300 horsepower in this for $3,000 or $4,000 less. It's just wild. You know, the value of this, especially in the modern environment where everything's having prices raised because of, you know, inflation and just, you know, this kind of stuff being less and less common these days. And so the fact you can get one of these things with all the tech this has, you know, these big screens, digital gauges, all this stuff for, you know, $33,000, $34,000 with the dual clutch, which also gives you the moonroof. I mean, it's really unbeatable, and so it still is just the value king. I mean, especially you look at WRXs, you know, you can get basically a base WRX for the same money with way less tech, way less fun, way less toys, no adjustability, no customization, no adaptive suspension unless you go up to the CVT top one, which is $42,000, which is $10,000 more than this almost. It's hilarious how like terribly they price that compared to this. This is fantastic in every possible way as far as the fun goes and stuff. Again, there's those minor little nitpick things where, you know, I think my perfect car would be this engine and this exhaust and the adaptive dampers and adjustability from this in a Civic platform. I think would be like my perfect compact sports sedan, you know, something like that, maybe with the Type R's dampers. But you know, aside from that, I think this is as close to perfect as it gets in this segment. And then considering the fact that it's cheaper and a better value than everything else in its segment, you know, I think it's really, it's just unbeatable, really, as far as value goes, as far as fun goes. It's just fantastic for sure. So anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Elantra N. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Hyundai for providing me here with the Elantra N to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.